Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ben Reynolds, producer and host of the Vent webinar series. Thanks for joining us today for this special two-part webinar, focusing on two of Texas's premier birding destination, South Texas in winter and West Texas in spring. Our online journey will begin in the Lower Rio Grande Valley, one of America's great birding and wildlife areas. Few other regions in the country offer such unequaled birding opportunities combined with easy accessibility to diverse locations. In contrast to much of the United States in January, the weather in South Texas is generally mild and comfortable with temperatures often in the 60s and 70s. With luxurious accommodations, excellent food, incredible birding, and generally pleasant weather conditions, the South Texas in Style winter tour is a must. The second part of our webinar will immerse us in the rugged beauty of West Texas during the height of spring bird migration. Brad will discuss the bird life and natural history of the Davis and Chinati Mountains, with a special emphasis on the historic Cibolo Creek Ranch. This tour offers a variety of habitats, including pine oak forest, desert chaparral, spring-fed desert oasis, and high elevation grasslands. We will seek out Southwest specialty birds and an array of spring migrants while enjoying great food and luxurious accommodations at the Hotel Olympia and Cibolo Creek Ranch. Guiding us on this virtual journey is Vent Guide Brad McKinney, live from South Padre, Texas. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, good afternoon, Ben. Thank you.
Brad has been passionate about birding since the late 1980s when he began chasing Mexican rarities in South Texas. Based in South Padre Island, Brad has guided Texas pelagic trips since 1995 and is a longtime leader at the Rio Grande Birding Festival. His birding and photography adventures have taken him across North America, Mexico, Central America, and Hawaii. He has also served on the Texas Bird Records Committee and co-authored a Birder's Guide to the Rio Grande Valley. With a background in biology and marine ecology, Brad brings both scientific insight and deep field experience to his Vent tours. We're thrilled you're here, and we encourage you to jot down any questions that come to mind. There will be time at the end for a live question and answer. With that, let's get started and turn it over to Brad.
Thank you very much, Ben. And a big hello to all my birding friends, past Vent friends from other trips that we've been on, and future Vent friends. Just want to welcome everybody to the webinar here this afternoon. And I just want to, again, let everyone know that I just love Texas birding. I've lived here for nearly 40 years, as Ben mentioned. Currently live at South Padre Island, Texas. And just want you to know that I've been on about 16 Vent tours in the last 4 years. And I'm just super excited to lead these two tours to South Texas and to West Texas. And I just want you to know that these Vent tours have the finest leaders and the best travelers on the best company, nature tour company in the world. So I'm really excited that y'all are tuning in here today to Birding Texas in 2 seasons, South and West. And we'll go ahead and begin now with the South Texas In-Style Tour. Man, I am so excited to be involved in these 2 Texas tours that I just can't wait for 2026 to begin. You know, last January was the first running of South Texas In-Style, and what a great tour it was. This webinar is going to begin with the South Texas In-Style Tour, and it will follow with a brand new tour, West Texas Spring Migration, Cibolo Creek Ranch in the Davis Mountains. And that's going to begin on April 24th, 2026, which is happens to be a travel day after Vent's 50th anniversary celebration. So if any of you all are considering extending your wonderful East Texas adventure during the peak of spring migration in the Trans-Pecos Mountains, we'd love to have you. Both of these tours are going to combine great birding with luxury accommodations and excellent dining experiences throughout. You know, whether it's the blazing orange colors of an Altamira Oriole, set against the dark green leaves of Texas ebony, or a very bunting emerging from the shadows to reveal a vibrant mosaic of plum, crimson, and violet blue. Our goal at Vent is for all travelers to see these birds well and to experience the best that South Texas and West Texas has to offer. We have a wonderful Vent tour this winter called South Texas in Style that begins on January 13th, 2026, with an extension 3 days later on January 23rd through 26th. You know, it's not easy choosing a cover image that truly represents the many habitats found in the Lower Rio Grande Valley. So I chose an image closer to home at South Padre Island. It shows a great blue heron raising its wings, a fitting tribute to another spectacular sunset along the Lower Laguna Madre. On this tour, we're going to visit many beautiful birding areas like this, along with savanna, wetlands. We're going to also see the riparian woodlands in the upper valley and mid valley along the Rio Grande, as well as Tamaulipan thorn scrubs. So we've got a lot of different places to see. And in addition to the great birds, we are really going to go and do a deeper dive into the local culture and history, which will include visits to museums in Edinburgh and in Port Isabel. We're also going to visit an important battlefield of the Mexican-American War in Brownsville. We're also going to take a couple of boat trips in the calm waters of the Laguna Madre. And most of all, we're going to have loads of fun each day. A little bit about the ecoregions. You know, Texas is a big state, large state. It's got 10 distinct major ecoregions. And as of August 2025, actually as of August, this year, we have a whopping total of 677 bird species that have been documented in Texas. And during our South Texas in Style tour, it will bring your attention down to the bottom of the map, and we're going to be birding 2 distinct ecoregions, the South Texas Plains and the Gulf Prairies and Marshes. Both have a high bird diversity there. The pink region in the map, that's an area we call the Lower Rio Grande Valley, which includes the 4 counties of southernmost Texas. And there's a bird list of over 530 species in this small region. It's actually, geologically, it's a river delta that was formed from deposits of the Rio Grande, which was a once mighty river. And the term Magic Valley was used really by early land developers to attract settlers. And the name Valley has just kind of stuck over the years. And our particular tour is going to fly in and out of McAllen, which is that blue cluster of places right in the middle of that pink map there. And the first 5 days of our tour are going to be leaving from McAllen each day to different birding areas, many of the valley hotspots. And so we'll be based out of a luxury hotel right there in the center of McAllen. And then we're going to be moving in the latter part of the tour to the east of those blue dots to the coast. And you'll see Port Isabel and South Padre Island listed there right in the Gulf. And that's where we're going to be spending the latter part of our tour. And each of these excursions will be no longer than 30-minute drives from both of these hotels in McAllen and in Port Isabel. After that tour completes, after about 11 days, we're then going to have an upper valley or upriver extension where it will be based out of Zapata. And that red cluster of dots will be some of the birding hotspots along the wonderful Rio Grande woodlands below Falcon Dam, which there's a lot of great birds in that area as well. So these are just 2 of many of the Rio Grande specialties. These are birds that really are found not much further than the border along Texas and Mexico. And we're going to see not just these 2 and not just see them well, but we're going to see a couple of dozen birds that are really unique to this area. And so we plan on getting wonderful scope views of each of these species, and it should be a tour where excellent photo ops abound. And the next few slides are going to be literally itineraries of our tour, starting in the mid-valley and then moving over towards the coast and eventually upriver to the Falcon Dam area and near Zapata. So we're going to start our tour the following morning, just 10 minutes from our hotel at the beautiful Quinta Mazatlan World Birding Center site. And we're going to be actually touring that Spanish revival style mansion after a morning of birding along the gardens, along forest trails, and bird feeding stations. And the entire property, it's about 25 acres, and it's run by the city of McAllen. And it's just loaded with birds, and maybe one of the best places to see clay-colored thrush on our tour. And like many of our birding destinations, Quinta Mazatlan has a really nice gift shop. After a little downtime in the late afternoon, we're going to be visiting a couple of urban locations within McAllen to look for a couple of parrot species. One of them is the raucous green parakeet, and the other is the red-crowned Amazon. And that red-crowned Amazon, actually both of these species are not found too far south of the valley, about maybe 2.5 hours down into Mexico from Brownsville. And that red-crowned Amazon is actually a northeast Mexico endemic. And so that's going to be definitely a bird that we're going to be looking for. The populations in the valley seem to be stable and even maybe increasing a little bit with well-documented breeding of both of these species. Okay, the next slide is of Benson State Park. That's the headquarters of the World Birding Center. And it's a really fantastic birding park, and it's comprised of about 800 acres. And many of the valley's specialties can be found there in various locations, from the feeding stations not far from the visitor center. We'll also be taking trips out along the forest trails, along an oxbow lake, and even to the Hawk Tower. And, just a mention of the bird walks, most of them will be between a half mile and a mile total. So it'll be really nice, well-maintained trails, very flat terrain. So it should be fairly easy to moderate hiking at worst, So we're really excited about being able to visit a lot of these state parks and national wildlife refuges during our tour. In the afternoon of that second morning, we're going to be visiting the Museum of South Texas History, which is just a wonderful museum. And it's going to be led by one of the local expert historians who's also the CEO of the museum, Dr. Francisco Guajardo. And he will guide us through the museum, and he'll provide excellent local discussion, especially about the borderland heritage and, the folks from South Texas and northeastern Mexico. So he really has a nice perspective on the local history. And you see our group there on the left. This was last year's tour. We had a wonderful group, and we're expecting another wonderful group again this year. And if you notice the gentleman on the left side of the photo, that's Rick Wright, my esteemed co-leader, and he's a longtime vent leader, and he's done many vent in-style tours and is currently leading 2 in-style vent tours in Europe. So hopefully we'll have Rick again next year. Really excited to visit that museum as well. Another museum we're going to visit later on in our tour is called the Port Isabel Historical Museum. And this museum features a lot of the local historical artifacts of the Mexican-American War, and also exhibits on Native American inhabitants, as well as some of the maritime and shrimping industries that have made this place famous. And this historic building was built back in 1899. It's called the Charles Champion Building, and it's had many iterations over the years. It was formerly a post office, a railway station, and it was actually in 1987 the place that I proposed to my wife, Jeanette, back when it was a restaurant. So it's had, in just more in the last couple decades, it's been the location for this wonderful historical museum. Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge. Wow, this is one of the crown jewels. It's a 2,000-acre refuge. It's just got wonderful diversity of plants and animals here. The 3 photos that you see on this particular slide were all taken on the same day in the winter of 2021. And that was a time when many of us found solace in nature. So it's a wonderful refuge. We're going to be traveling on the 3rd morning to Santa Ana. And some of the wonderful locations that we'll be visiting are the many oxbow lakes or impoundments along Santa Ana, which hold a lot of winter waterfowl, as well as one of our targets, the least grebe. So we'll be giving this bird a lot of attention when we ever are in that oxbow lake habitat. And some of the birds that really make the valley famous, these Rio Grande specialties. We have some wonderful birds. Some are colorful, some are a little more cryptic, some are easy and flashy to see. We've got the Altamira Oriole on the left. That's worth a second take, that picture. Also, the green jay and the great kiskadee. These are showy birds that we should see multiple looks and usually very well in the open. Whereas birds like the clay-colored thrush and the long-billed thrasher may be a little more difficult, but we should be in many locations where we'll get views of both of those South Texas specialties. Other birds that we're also going to be focusing on are birds like the olive sparrow down in the bottom left. Tropical kingbird is a bird that you really can see only in Texas and in the summer times in southeast Arizona, southwestern New Mexico. It's really been a specialty of ours in southernmost Texas. Here's, since 1991, there was really only one documented record for Texas, and it's been sort of a recent invasion in the last couple of decades where this bird is found in several locations. So we should run into tropical kingbird during our stay. Plain chachalaca, wonderful raucous bird of more riparian areas and thick wooded areas, along with white-tipped dove. And, buff-bellied hummingbird is one we're going to be seeking out in a couple of locations. It's nice to see hummingbirds in wintertime, and we might have a couple of species that we'll run into, especially looking for the buff-bellied hummingbird. Along the Rio Grande at Santa Ana, boy, I tell you what, there's going to be lots of opportunities to see a lot of this refuge. There's going to be a couple of hikes that we'll be taking during our morning. Both of the hikes end up to going through a lot of this Tamaulipan thorn scrub and more riparian areas. That some of them are beautiful Spanish moss draped trees, cedar elms, and hackberries, among others. And it's got an extensive trail system. Our hikes will probably be limited to about a mile and a half. They go out to what we call willow lakes as well as pintail lakes. So there's two different hikes we'll take that morning. For those that aren't up for a longer hike, we also have the opportunity to spend some time at the bird feeding stations right next to the visitor center, as an option for anyone that wants to sit out one of the longer hikes. But again, most of our hikes are within a mile or two at best. One of the features that's a real attraction at Santa Ana is their hawk tower, which is great for hawk migration. It's also great in the wintertime to see a lot of our resident raptors and other species that might be up in the canopy. So it's a great panorama from which to view lots of species, including one of the specialty most sought after raptors in the valley, which is the hookbill kite. It is only found in a very limited stretch of Rio Grande from about Santa Ana upriver to about the Falcon Dam area. So that's a high target. It's a beautiful raptor. It's got a real stunning facial pattern with a little bit of green and yellow above that pale eye. This happens to be a male, a kind of a dark gray plumage with striking barring on its underparts and its underwing with a long banded tail. And this particular bird flew by the hawk tower at Santa Ana a few years back, and it wasn't until later that I realized it had one of its favorite foods, the tree snail, in its hook talon, in its hook bill. It's a real stunning raptor. Other raptors that we will see in just about any place we go in the Mid-Valley. Some of these are fairly common. Others are a little more difficult, more habitat specific, but we should see multiple looks at northern harrier, Cooper's hawk, American kestrel, and as well as crested caracara once we're in the coastal savanna. But some of the more difficult birds to find during our trip, but also ones that we will look for and hopefully find, would be white-tailed kite, which is also found a lot of times in that coastal savanna habitat, and merlins. They could just show up anywhere. Some of the buteos, we've got, parabuteo, Harris's hawk, we've got red-shouldered hawk. Those are the more common raptors that we'll see throughout our trip, but we could also find places where gray hawk hangs out, which is in the more riparian areas especially in the mid-valley around Santa Ana to Benson State Park. They could be in the middle of town at Quinta Mazatlan or others. So we'll be looking for them in various locations, as well as zone-tailed hawks. You just never know where a zone-tailed hawk's going to pop up. It could be in the middle of an urban setting on the way to lunch, or it may not occur at all, but it's one that we'll keep an eye out for. And by the way, a really great Raptor ID seminar, Eric Brunke, longtime vent leader, has a wonderful webinar on Raptor ID, especially from his time in Duluth at Hawk Ridge. So tune into vent.com to look for any of Eric's wonderful ID seminars. We're also going to be spending an afternoon at the Edinburgh Scenic Wetlands, which has really been a good location over the years during wintertime for buff-bellied hummingbird, green kingfisher, sometimes ring kingfisher, and some of the winter warblers. And it's got a really nice interpretive center inside, as long with wetlands, so we might see a variety of birds in the afternoon that day. And on our transition day from the Mid-Valley to Port Isabel, about halfway in between McAllen to Port Isabel is a town called Weslaco. Weslaco has a wonderful state park. It's called the Estero Llano Grande State Park. And it's really got some great locations for wetlands. They've got flooded fields, which brings in a lot of shorebirds and waders and waterfowl. So we'll be looking through a lot of flocks of teal and waterfowl along that boardwalk area right out front, that overlook. There's also a tropical zone that has a lot of upland birds. It's a 230-acre refuge and has a really nice interpretive center. So we'll spend time on the transition day, a whole morning there in Weslaco on our way to Port Isabel. One of the attractions at Estero Llano Grande is the McCall's eastern screech owl, which is a distinct race of eastern screech owl. So it's really a South Texas sort of specialty eastern screech owl that only has a gray morph and no whinny. It's just got a trill, and often this bird pops out of a nest hole. So we'll be looking for the eastern screech owl at Estero Llano Grande, and it's also a location, a very difficult to find bird most of the time, which is the common paraki, one of our resident specialty night jars. And there's a place near Alligator Lake at Estero Llano Grande where we often see roosting common parakis. So that would be high on our target list in the Mid-Valley. At all of the locations that we'll be at, we're always going to keep an ear and an eye out for mixed species flocks that are usually led by the Pied Piper, the black-crested titmouse. And in those mixed flocks, we might have blue-gray gnatcatcher, orange-crowned warbler, blue-headed vireo, yellow-rumped warbler. So there's a lot of different birds that might be in and around these little flocks that are moving through the canopy. And sometimes they come right out to the edge and we can see them quite well. Other times they're kind of frustratingly quick moving through the treetops. But also in those mixed feeding flocks are some of the winter warblers that are really fun to look through. Birds like black-throated green frequently are found in these flocks. Wilson's warbler may be in the flock, it may be on the edge of a flock, or maybe on its own, as will be yellow-throated warbler, which is kind of a palm tree specialist that we sometimes see the birds up in the tops of the crowns of the palms, sometimes sable palms, and sometimes the California palms, the naturalized palms. And really our specialty winter warblers are the ones on the bottoms, specifically the black-throated gray warbler. Usually there's one or two in the valley somewhere in these mixed flocks, and so we'll be definitely combing through the flocks looking for birds like black-throated gray. And probably the all-star of the winter flock would be the tropical parula. That's really a resident specialty. Can be found both breeding locally in the summertime as well as the wintertime. But it's a very low-density specialty bird. Pine warblers could be anywhere, frequently more in the Benson State Park area out in the western Hidalgo County, but we'll also keep an eye out for pine warbler amongst all the winter flock. And from the coast, we'll be literally in the Port Isabel area for the last 4 days of our tour. And one of the mornings we're going to be spending at the Brownsville Resaca de la Palma State Park, which is a wonderful park. It's a 1,200-acre state park that has a real wide variety of habitat types. But actually, one of the best birding locations is right near the visitor center. They have a bird feeding station and water features where it attracts a lot of the resident specialties, some of the winter birds as well. And there's just, seems like over the last few years, there's been a lot of rare birds that have shown up there as well. Also got great butterflies in the gardens. Even in winter, when it gets warm and sunny, sometimes we'll see butterflies that are more tropical in nature, red-bordered pixie and blue meadowlark, amongst others. And just have to mention some of the rarities that are possible anywhere, not just at Resaca de la Palma, but anywhere we go. And this particular slide was all taken within 1 week, a couple years back at Resaca de la Palma. We had rose-throated Picard and on the left, which is the real bright race of rose-throated Picard. You know, you go down to Costa Rica and there really is no rose at all in the throat, but the ones up in northeast Mexico tend to have this real bright rosy throat. If you were fortunate enough to see one, that would be great to see a male. Crimson-collared grosbeak is one of the others that's, you know, some years you'll have not just one, but maybe 2 or 3 showing up. And we hope next winter will be one of those years where this northeast Mexico endemic shows up in the valley. Golden crowned warbler is another one that sometimes shows up along with blue bunting at the bottom. Wow, that's a male that just lit up the water feature one winter. Dusky cap flycatcher seems to be one of the more regular rarities, and this is of the Lawrencii race. It's a northeast Mexico version of the dusky cap, which is a much richer color than the ones you see out west in Arizona and even in West Texas. On one of our, near the end of the trip, we're going to be taking a trip out to the Palo Alto Battlefield, which is really just a wonderful historical park that is in that sort of coastal savanna habitat type. So in addition to a rich history, and this was the first battle of the U.S.-Mexico War, or the Mexican-American War back in 1846, was the first battle of the Battle of Palo Alto, and it really set the tone for that war. A couple years later, the signing of the Treaty of Hidalgo in 1848 really did cede a lot of territory to the United States. Vast territories were included. So we're going to learn a little bit about the history. We'll hear about names like Zachary Taylor, Jacob Brown, and Jacob Brown was killed at Fort Brown, and it was actually the name of Brownsville. So we'll hear a lot about that. In addition, this ecotone region of savanna, coastal savanna, along with dotted prickly pear and some thorn scrub, really make it a great place for winter sparrows as well as raptors. So we'll be looking for things like Casa sparrow, sometimes even western brewer sparrows, but more likely be clay-colored sparrows show up in some of these scrubby habitats in this area. But one of the real draws of this coastal savanna is looking for a couple of real special raptors. One of them is like one of my most favorite raptors, the white-tailed hawk. Such a beautiful, striking color pattern with that medium gray and above with the light-colored underparts. Kind of has a hooded effect in flight with those long, broad wings that kind of come to a point. But it's that blazing white tail that really just draws me in. I just love that raptor. And we usually have places we can see white-tailed hawks, so we'll definitely look for that bird anytime we're within habitat, which is usually along the last 15 miles towards the coast near South Padre Island, Port Isabel. Another special raptor is actually an endangered species in the U.S., the Oplomado falcon. So the Oplomado falcon is a bird that actually all these birds that we see today in South Texas, and I include South Texas to include Port Isabel, really all the way up towards Corpus Christi in this little zone of coastal savanna, where this bird used to be relatively locally common back at the turn of the century. We're talking about the early 1900s, but it was extirpated back in the 1940s due to DDT and others. So Peregrine Fund has been involved in a reintroduction program for years. Started in the mid-1980s, releasing up to 1,500 birds over a span of 25 years or so. 30 years. They stopped releases back in 2014, but you'll still see some banded birds and others that don't have bands, which are the result of successful breeding. And I was fortunately able to actually be involved in one of the first breeding pairs in the Brownsville area near the Brownsville Navigation District, near the Port of Brownsville in 1995, where we documented a couple of active nests of Aplomado falcons. So we'll definitely be looking for this beautiful raptor, especially along that area along Highway 100 from Los Fresnos to Port Isabel. Speaking of Port Isabel, this is where we'll be staying at the Lighthouse Boutique Hotel on the right, which is adjacent to the famous Port Isabel Lighthouse, which is the only public lighthouse that allows visitors to walk on up through the spiral staircase up to the tower. It's got a beautiful view up there. We're all welcome to do that. We can do it in groups or on our own. We have a lot of opportunities to visit the lighthouse. I mean, we're just across the street. If you look kind of in the center of that photograph on the left, you'll see the Lighthouse Boutique Hotel with that palm tree in front of it. It's got about 10 beautiful rooms that we'll be basically renting out, and we'll be having wonderful breakfast there in the morning at the cafe. So it's a really great location to really access the coastal part of our tour. And when we're on the coast, we'll just be able to see wonderful views of not only the open coast on the right, actually see the Gulf and the waves lapping up on the beach, but there's a lot of good birds there too. So we'll take an opportunity to actually visit the open coast where we can walk along the sand and view some things out there, especially some terns and shorebirds and maybe even distant gannets. Sometimes are close enough where we can see them through the scope, and sometimes with binoculars. So we'll be looking for birds along the immediate coast. But really the real draw of this area is the vast, expansive Laguna Madre, which is a hypersaline lagoon that really is a productive area. It's hypersaline because it really, the salt content is about double that of the ocean nearby. There's very little inflow and high evaporation, and there's only the Arroyo Colorado River that pours in, and it's a small river. It's a tributary of the Rio Grande, and that's really the only freshwater input. You have to go way up north, about 130 miles north with the Nueces River to have any kind of freshwater input into this system. And it's really only in the northern parts of the upper Laguna Madre that you get any kind of freshwater inputs. And that really allows the grasses, the shoal grass, the widgeon grass to sustain these large flocks of waterfowl and other birds. So we're really excited about seeing flocks of redheads like this, where most of the population of redheads is in northern Mexico and southern Texas along the Laguna Madre. And they actually feed in the Laguna Madre and fly to freshwater areas to drink and to bathe. But they're constantly moving from fresh to salt water throughout the day. And so we have lots of opportunities to see some of these amazing spectacles here at South Padre Island. South Padre Island Birding and Nature Center, definitely one of our birding hotspots, one of the valley's premier birding locations in migration as well as year round. The boardwalk system there is amazing. So we'll be able to see up close lots of water birds, shorebirds, and some of the wintering things that hang out in the mangroves. On these vent tours, it seems like there's always a surprise or two. It's like every one I've ever been on. There's always something you just completely don't expect. Well, this was certainly true last year in January when we were viewing from the boardwalk out into the mangrove-lined bayshore. When we were looking at some wading birds, we saw great blue herons and a few others. A reddish egret was out there. And all of a sudden, lumbering up on the mud flat, we couldn't believe our eyes. We had a green sea turtle coming in from the bay onto the land, and it was basically a cold-stunned sea turtle that was trying to avoid the cold waters, because we had a cold front that passed through a couple days earlier, and it really dropped the bay temperatures quite drastically. And there were several turtles that were rescued in the general area, but this one in particular was actually climbing up onto the mud flat. And all of our group were just amazed. We saw wonderful scope views, but more importantly, we got word to the nearby, actually next door, Sea Turtle Inc. And within minutes, they had a couple of volunteers that came in, and they gave us a quick interpretive lesson on sea turtles before rushing out to save the turtle. And wonderful thing is happy ending on this one. About a week later, we were told that the animal was healthy and released into the Gulf. And they release it into the Gulf because the Gulf waters are much safer and warmer than sending it back into the Laguna Madre, where the bay waters were still kind of cool at that point. So we're real happy to see that that was a successful end to that spectacle. And while on the coast, there's just a myriad of wonderful, beautiful, unique birds that we'll be looking for. Some of them are quite common. Others are much, much tougher to find. One of the birds that we'll be looking at that inhabits a very local stretch of mangrove habitat is the subspecies of yellow warbler that we call the mangrove yellow warbler. And that bird on the left top is a male that has that bright, rusty head. Some of them are not quite so well marked, but there's a good chance we will see or hear one at the birding center. And we also have another opportunity on a boat trip to see one. But there's just a wonderful array of colorful, specialized birds, spoonbills with their spatulate bills, long-billed curlews with their 9-inch long bills, looking for crabs and worms in the mudflat, snowy, piping, semi-palmated plovers, amongst other shorebirds are out in the mudflat, which are all accessible from a couple of locations that we're going to be at, from the birding center to the convention center. Other birds that we'll be certainly looking for are the comical antics of the reddish egret, top left, the skimming behavior. There's hundreds of black skimmers that roost and actually feed right nearby, American oyster catchers, clapper rails, amongst many, many coastal birds we will be enjoying during our visit along the coast. The South Padre Island Convention Center is a place that's just adjacent to the South Padre Island Birding and Nature Center. And this is a really famous location for migrant birds during the September through November months, as well as March through May. But it's also really nice for winter birding too. Temperatures are usually mild. Some winter flocks sometimes drop in. You sometimes have winter residents, hermit thrushes and others. Great kiskadees are there year round. They're bright, colorful plumage. So it's a place we will definitely visit. There's also a mudflat just north of there that we will spend some time scanning for shorebirds. Beautiful place. In addition to the rich culture and history, we are going to spend a little time on the Laguna Madre on a boat, which is in a flat stretch of Laguna Madre, usually fairly calm. And we're talking about 1-inch ripples would be a rough day out there. And so we're going to take a trip from Port Isabel out to a place we call Bird Island and look and search for not only mangrove yellow warbler in the center. That's a subadult bird. It's a young male, but there's also other birds of interest. Marbled godwits, sometimes Bonaparte's gulls cruise around. Common loons are not so common there, but they occasionally show up. But there's a myriad of birds out along the Brownsville ship channel we call the Brazos Santiago Pass, which has got some really nice good opportunities to see things really close up. It's just fun to be out on a boat for a couple of hours in the morning and see what's out there on the Laguna Madre. And the second boat trip is going to be a sunset cruise. I can't guarantee you a sunset like this, but there's usually very nice sunsets along Laguna Madre. This is the view from South Padre Island looking westward or back towards the mainland. And our boats will be traveling along the channel there, and we'll be out for about the last hour of daylight one day, which will give us an opportunity to see a sunset or two. There's also some birds out there. This is last year's group, and there's Rick Wright again on the left boat, and I'm on the right boat. We have some intrepid passengers. Event travelers were grit sports. We had a little bit of weather there that day, but they were bundled up and took it in stride, and we did see some really nice birds along the channel. We had a lot of brown pelicans cruising through. We even had a tropical kingbird escorting us above our boat for about 50 yards. You just never know what you're going to see out in the Laguna Madre, but we are going to have a sunset opportunity. And where this sunset ends, this boat trip will end at the same dock that we leave, which happens to be one of the finest restaurants on South Padre Island. And we have wonderful, you just basically walk up from the dock right to our table. And we're going to have an opportunity to sample some wonderful Mexican or seafood cuisine. There's also great vegan dishes. And I guess that I should have mentioned that all along. Not only is the dining going to be excellent, but there's opportunities for vegan dishes at every one of our locations. The picture on the right is a nice little sampling of some of the cocktails that they serve there. And actually, to come clean, this is a picture I took last winter when my sister-in-law came to town. And just for the record, I was the designated driver on that dinner. But it just shows you some of the fun cocktails that are available for those that would like them. And so that basically completes our main tour, and we have an upriver extension to Starr County, which is really going to be fun for those who would like to see the wilder side of the Rio Grande. We will be actually on the river in several locations to view some of these really famous birding sites that have a lot of specialty birds, especially places like the Santa Margarita Bluffs. At dawn, this can be a magical location. As you see on the left, just beautiful. There's opportunities to see some real special birds like Muscovy duck. We can see things like even red-billed pigeon on occasion, hook-billed kite, even rose-throated Bicard, birds like that, Audubon's oriole, Morelet seed-eater even from there, along with just seeing wonderful views, usually of ring kingfisher cruising along the treetops in the scrubbier areas, just away from the river, cactus wren, Pyrrholoxia, black-throated sparrows, and others. And one of the hikes that we'll be taking will get us into a position to see one of the true U.S. rarities. The only place you can see this bird is Santa Margarita Ranch for the brown jay I'm talking about, that bird on the upper right. And in the last couple of years, there's been actually 2 family units of brown jays that have really graced this area, this woodland area right along the river. We've been very happy and very successful to see this bird in numbers, including a lot of young birds with the yellower bills. This is a sort of a juvenile, almost coming into adult with its yellow, and it turns dark as an adult. There's a lot of great birds in and along Santa Margarita Ranch, and a bird that we will certainly be keeping on the eBird list, eBird reports, rare bird alerts, is the mottled owl. This is a bird that showed up almost 2 years ago and still been around as of this summer. I don't know what the latest reports, I haven't heard any recent reports, but there's a good chance that bird's still around. And if not, there's still wonderful birds to see there, even without the mottled owl. But this is last year's pictures. All these pictures were taken from last year's tour, which included scaled quail right near the location of the owner there, Jorge, along with collared peccary. It's always fun to see some of the, I even had a quaddy one year along the river. So you just never know what to expect at Santa Margarita Ranch. Another location that's really fun to go to is a place just upriver from there called Salineno. And there's also Falcon State Park that we'll be visiting. And Salineno has a wonderful, it's also a Valley Land Fund location, which is a wonderful tract along the river. And there's been volunteers that have really been maintaining these bird feeding stations from about November through early April. And I mean, to see numbers of Altamira orioles like you see in that photo on the left, I think we counted 9 or 10 last year during our stay. And occasionally one of our targets, the Audubon's oriole, would come in. So we'll spend some time at, just kind of enjoying the morning right there. There's also along the river, there's also a chance to see even Muscovy duck and sometimes Morelet seed-eater. So there's anything that you can see at Santa Margarita, you could possibly show up as well at Salineno. So it's just another opportunity to see some great birds on this upriver extension. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in today. And I mean this with all my heart. I really would love to see you in South Texas this winter. And here's a look at some of the dates and prices, as well as Eric at Ventberg will be managing this tour. He's our operations manager. We've got all the information on this webinar, and want to thank you again, and just love to have you in South Texas this winter. Thank you. Just excited to talk about this next presentation, which will feature West Texas spring migration at Cibolo Creek Ranch and the Davis Mountains. The tour dates for this tour are April 24th through May 1st, 2026, and the following year, April 30th through May 7th, 2027. As far as this year's tour, it really is nice that it lands really on the last day of the 50th event's anniversary celebration. So those that would like to travel from East to West Texas to experience the best of Texas in both locations during spring migration can certainly do that, and look forward to doing that. Actually, I'll be traveling that 2-hour trip from Houston to El Paso on that travel day after the 50th anniversary celebration. So really looking forward to both of these tours. And you know, in West Texas, beautiful desert skies, these rugged Chinati Mountains, a 5-star ranch resort, a desert oasis, you know, in great nature, wonderful birding. That really does typify the Cibolo Creek Ranch experience. What we're going to talk about on this slide is just about the ecoregion that we're going to be visiting. When we're in West Texas, near Cibolo Creek Ranch in the Davis Mountains, we're going to be in the Trans-Pecos Mountains. And so this tour is going to actually begin and end in El Paso, with the first and last nights there in El Paso. And what we're going to be then doing is traveling sort of southeastward towards Alpine, but not actually reaching Alpine. It's about a 3-hour drive from El Paso to Fort Davis, which will be our first stop. But there will be a couple of birding spots between El Paso and Fort Davis that will certainly keep us occupied, and in a really good way. So the ecoregion that we're talking about here in the Trans-Pecos is really characterized as like an arid, mountainous desert landscape. And the two mountain ranges that we're going to be visiting are, the first is going to be that literally rise from the Chihuahuan Desert, are going to be the Davis Mountains, which is located in and around Fort Davis, and the Chinati Mountains, which are the mountains, the more rugged mountains in the Cibolo Creek Ranch area. And both of these locations offer wonderful accommodations and just great food throughout. So our first morning, we'll be leaving El Paso to a really nice wooded park. And that's going to be the Rio Bosque Park. And this is a place where we can see a variety of migrants. You know, in late April, there's things like Cassin's vireo and McGillivray's warbler and others, amongst the resident specialties like Gamble's quail, Harris's hawk, and things like Crystal thrasher. We're certainly going to be looking for that first morning. And then on our way towards Fort Davis, we're going to stop at one of the reservoirs, and it's just a wonderful place to see things like Western and Clark's grebe. You can see these are Clark's grebe here by the amount of white in the face. And it's really interesting to see the sexual dimorphism between the female on the left, which is considerably smaller than the male on the right. And the male on the right also has a much larger bill. But in addition to seeing those sexual dimorphism differences, we're going to be looking also for Western grebes, as well as a variety of water birds, late waterfowl that are lingering around, and who knows what might show up on these reservoirs. We'll spend a little bit of time on one or maybe more of the reservoirs on our way out towards Fort Davis. This is a slide of the Davis Mountains Preserve. It's just an outstanding location in this part of Texas. It really is a wetter climate. By virtue of its geographical location, it seems to catch more rainfall. It's also fairly high as far as the elevation goes. If you look out in the far center of the photo, just below the clouds, that's Mount Livermore or Mount Baldy up top. It's about 8,300 plus feet in elevation. Whereas the Chinattis are a little bit more arid, and we'll talk about that when we get to the Cibolo Creek Ranch area. But this area is characterized by this beautiful oak habitat, juniper, oak, and pine, as well as a high elevation grassland. So it's just a beautiful location to spend a couple of days. And what we'll be doing is on that first afternoon, we're going to be heading up to McDonald Observatory near Mount Locke, and we'll be able to view these sky islands, they call them, this area, which are like isolated mountains out in this rising right above the Chihuahuan Desert. So it's just a really unique habitat. A lot of bird diversity there as well. When you include migration, there's no telling what could show up while we're out. So we're going to be staying at a really nice historic hotel called Hotel Olympia in Fort Davis. And so on our travels up to the McDonald Observatory, we're going to be looking for some special birds. We'll talk about one of them on the next slide, Montezuma quail. We're also going to be in this area, we're going to be going to the Davis Mountains State Park. We're also going to be visiting the Davis Mountains Preserve, which is where this photo was taken last year. And an interesting thing about the Nature Conservancy, which manages this property, is that it was acquired in the late 1990s. And it was one of the most wonderful purchases that's been made out in West Texas, in that it was only possible that this land was preserved because of Victor Manuel. He really did persuade the board at the Nature Conservancy to pool their money together in their annual budget and purchase this 30,000 acre wonderland for birds and nature and people. And subsequently, there's been other land acquisition and easements that have accumulated over 100,000 acres continuously in this area. And so one of Victor's many legacies is, in his passion and enthusiasm and intelligence, really has created a situation that we can all now enjoy, birders and birds alike. So thank you again, Victor, for help establish this wonderful Davis Mountains Preserve. Here is one of our targets, Montezuma quail. And I want to thank Barry Zimmer for providing not only this photo, but the two photos on the next slide as well. Montezuma quail is a cryptic but yet beautiful species that is even as beautiful as this photo is, it really does blend in when you're looking for them. It's amazingly camouflaged in this desert grassland area that we're going to be searching, that are dotted with trees like some of the junipers and oaks. So we're going to be in the right habitat throughout our 2 days to hopefully get a glimpse or two of one of these special birds. So, this is, one of our targets, the Montezuma quail. And so we'll have opportunities that very first afternoon on our way to McDonald Observatory. Also, I think one of our best shots is at the state park, Davis Mountain State Park, as well as also an outside chance at the Davis Mountains Preserve. They're there. It's just a matter of finding them. And it seems like they've been tougher and tougher to see, in the last 10 years. Drought has something to do with it, but it's just a bird that sometimes we run into them and sometimes we don't. But we'll certainly be looking for this iconic species of the desert Southwest. Another couple of really nice birds that we'll be looking for when we're at the Davis Mountains Preserve. One of them is a pine specialist, especially the ponderosa pine that are up in the higher elevations of the Davis Mountains Preserve. We'll talk about the Grace's Warbler, and that's a bird that we often see, but you've got to really be in the ponderosa pine in order to see it. And those ponderosa pines take a little bit of traveling to get to in the van. So we'll be definitely, as we approach the Madera Canyon Trail, be looking for Grace's Warbler. There's also birds that are fairly widespread across the West that are in upper elevations, like black-headed grosbeak. Beautiful birds will also add a nice splash of color to the birds that we see on our trips out to the Davis Mountains Preserve. There's also birds like hepatic tanager that really do like the oaks, as well as, of course, the acorn woodpecker, which are kind of acorn specialists, oak specialists. So we're going to be looking for these and other birds in this Davis Mountains Preserve habitat, which is just wonderful pine oak habitat. And there's other species up that are kind of representative of the Rocky Mountains that we'll be looking for as well. Birds like the white-breasted nuthatch that are of the Rocky Mountain race, which may someday be a split, maybe in the near future. But that's a bird that we frequently do find on the preserve, along with Plumbeus vireo, Woodhouse's scrub jay, black-chinned sparrow, and others. So it's just a wonderful location to spend some time, and it's usually cooler and a bit wetter than some of the other areas of West Texas. So it's a real special place to spend a couple of days. Now we're going to turn our attention to the Cibolo Creek Ranch, this historic ranch that has 3 forts on it. This was a place that Milton Favor back in the 1850s settled and actually constructed 3 different forts, the Fortín del Cibolo, also the Fortín de Ciénaga, and the Fortín de Morita. There's 3 different Spanish forts that were really constructed sort of as the headquarters of his growing cattle operation, which was really only made possible because of the natural springs in the area. So it's just a wonderful ranch. So Milton Favor passed his property of 30,000 acres along to his wife and their descendants. And it wasn't until the 1980s, the late 1980s actually, that John Poindexter purchased the Cibolo Creek Ranch. And he began an extensive renovation of not only the forts, but other areas of the ranch that has really made it what it is today, a 5-star luxury ranch resort. And it just offers great birding along the creek there, along the natural springs, in the cottonwoods, in the cacti scrublands. There's just a lot of different habitat types along this oasis. It's really impressive. And I was fortunate in my trip last May to have met John Poindexter. And I just want you to know he was very impressed hearing about our event group that's going to be coming this April, and really hopefully will be there. He doesn't always show up, but he did. He landed on his local airstrip nearby and just showed up kind of unannounced. And it was just a real pleasure meeting this 3rd generation Texan that just had a lot of stories to tell. Another interesting area of discussion is the food there is just impressive. I mean, it's an authentic Southwestern menu that really is inspired by Mexico's renowned chefs. So it's a wonderful place to dine as well as spend some time in and around the ranch itself. Cibolo Creek Ranch was actually named after Native Americans that lived in the late 17th and early 18th century called the Cibolos. And the Cibolos, that name translates to bison or buffalo. And these were buffalo hunters. They were nomadic buffalo hunters who specialized in bison hunting. And while we're there on the grounds, we'll be able to see some of these large bison herds just kind of roaming freely around. It's a real spectacle. It's incredible to see some of these wonderful creatures, some of them exotic, most of them native around the grounds. Magnificent creatures. As you get away from the creek and the natural springs, you sort of see what it's like in the rugged Chinati Mountains in more of a xeric desert landscape dotted with mesquite and like these blooming cholla cactus, which should be in full bloom next spring as well. It's just a magnificent desert experience with the dark skies at night, and in the daytime it's cool. Usually temperatures are kind of cool in the mornings and evenings, but it can get a bit hot during the day. It just depends on frontal passages, and things like that. But late April, early May should be a pleasant time to be in this general area. Other cacti that you might come across are things like the moonlight cactus and the strawberry pitaya and others. Just a wonderful place to explore the flora and fauna of this wonderful region. Briefly mentioned earlier the natural springs at Cibolo Creek, and there's a couple of springs. One of them nourishes the Cibolo Creek itself, and then on the other side of the ranch, which we'll be visiting one of the days at the Cienega Fort, or Fortín de Cienega, there's another creek, and I'll show you a slide in a minute, of the natural springs that come out of the ground there. And, it's just a place that it's just hard to believe how these springs literally transform the desert into this riparian corridor of cottonwoods. So they nourish the cottonwoods. It really is the lifeblood of the ranch, these natural springs. And so a look at the birds. We really do have some wonderful birds that show up along the creek, birds like vermilion flycatcher and black phoebe. And so we're going to spend some time just right outside our hotel room. You can literally 50 steps and you're in the middle of just an incredible birding experience. So that creek is just a magnet for a lot of these species that are just, some of them are migrating, others are resident birds or breeding birds. So you just never know what you might see along the creek. I can say that there's going to be quite a few vermilion flycatchers and black phoebes around. And also along the creek, there's lots of sparrows, white-crowned sparrows, Cassan sparrows, and many others, not to mention the beautiful black-throated sparrow that we'll see in and around the creek and sometimes off into the scrubbier habitats. But it was just an amazing experience this past May to see not just one or two blue grosbeaks feeding in the grassland, but I had a dozen in one flock just feeding on grasses right next to the stream. So it's just an incredible experience. My eBird trip report actually had 36 blue grosbeaks in 2 days while birding the ranch. It's just amazing numbers and variety of birds along this creek. And so, I haven't really talked about downtime at all, but usually in the afternoons there's an hour or so of downtime, or maybe even an hour and a half if we're really feeling generous. But there's opportunities for those to visit the cool swimming pool waters. It's really a refreshing dip. Depending on how cool it is outside, you may want to get in or you may not. But the pond also is like the pool, is sustained by the natural springs that run through the fort and collect. And he's got this pond stocked with fish. He's got rainbow trout, bluegill, largemouth bass. And for those that want to go fishing, there's a little boat that you can go out there and fish for a few minutes or an hour if you want in some of the downtime. So and then we usually go birding after dinner, or even before dinner after the downtime. So there's a little bit of time just to relax on your own as well as be a part of our birding excursions. And I mentioned a minute ago about Cienega Fort, or the Fortín de la Cienega, which literally means Fort of the Marsh. And the Cienega Springs is a really birdy area just up from the fort here. And there's just lots of things that are in and around these natural springs. A lot of migrant warblers. I had loads of Audubon's, yellow rump warblers, Wilson's warblers, McGillivray's warbler. There was no Virginia's warblers, but I would expect that'd be a great place for that bird as well, amongst others. A lot of wood peewees and Cassan's kingbirds, western kingbirds. Just a lot of diversity. Quite a nice experience traveling. It's about a 30-minute drive across the ranch to get to what they call the east end of the ranch. We'll be staying on the west end at the Fortín de Cibolo, but there's also a nice fort to look at. It's a historical fort. It's just nice, easy hiking and exploring the springs and all the bird life in the cottonwoods and the mulberry trees as well. This Cibolo Creek Ranch truly is a 5-star resort. I mean, it's a luxury ranch resort. These are photos from this past May, and it shows the great room on the left and some of the dining areas with authentic Texas decor, A lot of Mexican influences, like what you see on the roof there. Just beautifully, beautifully adorned in every aspect, from the masks that are seen along the top on the right photo. You can't capture in photos just all the little things, all the little trinkets in and around these living areas. But it's really fun just to, explore after lunchtime a little of the amenities that it has to offer. We'll mention that in a minute. Some of the smaller museums that are around. But before that, just to look at the dining table, there's several of these dining tables arranged in this dining area that have beautiful views out into the cottonwoods on the grounds of Cibolo Creek. You can see the pond out there, the swimming pool. There's even a fitness area off to the left as well. They got weights and some machines and treadmills and things like that. If we need a little more calorie burning, there's an opportunity for that too. The dining is spectacular. Enjoyed every meal I had there. You see a lot of Western menu, a lot of dishes, some wild game, some steaks and things like that. But there's also vegan options, believe it or not, that are available at every meal. So don't let that deter you. Here's a reading room on the left and one of the several little museum rooms on the right. The reading rooms there's just incredible things that a lot of historical books, a lot of history and even some bird life and other natural history you'll see in and around the bookshelves. I didn't have a whole lot of time to read some of the books while I was there. I just was looking through it, and it was just quite impressive. And some of the historical documents, maps, and things that are framed on the walls. You could spend hours just looking through these rooms. The museum room on the right has one of these little portable cannons that's really impressive, this brass cannon, and some of the firearms and pistols and rifles. And it's just that's just one of three different rooms that really have a unique historical perspective of this area. Just a wonderful place to spend some time. The rooms, impressive. These are just newly renovated as well. They really do evoke the warmth and comfort of an authentic Texas homestead. A lot of rustic yet modern details and really luxurious amenities in every room. It's just incredible, and every room is unique too. So I visited a couple of rooms just to take a peek, and they're all amazing. And so the saltillo floors, when you leave your room, and if you can't even see off the photo on the left, but there's great birding right off those pillars, those wooden pillars off to the right. There's water features, and we might hang a hummingbird feeder up. Matter of fact, we will. And I didn't have anything come into it except a black-chinned hummer, but who knows what might show up. Lucifer's always, something to look for. So we're definitely keeping our eye on some of those kinds of specialties. And speaking of birds, wow, these are some of the excursions away from the immediate creek and the hotel rooms. We might take some short hikes. Most of them will be from the vans. We'll drive to places that we can see things. Hopefully varied bunting will make an appearance. Black-throated sparrows are quite common, and it's just one of my favorite sparrows, just so dapper and beautiful. Cactus wrens seem to abound there. Pyrrholoxia is quite common. It's really nice to see them with northern cardinals too, so you'll see the two together, especially near the springs. The cardinals tend to like it there, whereas the Pyrrholoxia is out in a little bit drier habitat types. But just lots of variety of birds, especially when you get along the springs. A lot of warblers, yellow-rumped here of the Audubon's race with the beautiful yellow throat. Zone-tailed hawk seems to be fairly reliable, at least it was for me. This bird even roosted in the cottonwoods right near the hotel, so it's certainly a bird we'll look for amongst the turkey vultures. And there are some excursions that take us up to a waterfall trail, which is dry at the time. It's only wet during, the heavy monsoon rains, usually this time of year actually. But in April, I would expect it to be dry like it was in May when I was there. But a lot of really special birds are around. I mean, Scott's orioles are not far from here. I was lucky enough to get a gray vireo pop up on a Spanish dagger and posed for a little bit. My photo should be better than that, but that's all I have to show you of the gray vireo on the left. But there was white-throated swifts in and around this canyon. Lots of nice stuff. I mean, lesser goldfinches are around. We had lots of scaled quail running around out there. Lots of black-throated sparrows, Cassin sparrows, canyon towhee, stuff like that. And so that's one of the many excursions that we'll be taking from the ranch itself in the vans. There are some shorter hiking trails along the springs as well that we can do. So a nice variety of birding opportunities while at this luxury ranch. And it's not all birds as well. I mean, there's quite a variety of mammals, not just exotics, mind you, but a lot of natural occurring native species. The squirrel's really nice. I really like that rock squirrel. I even had a antelope squirrel I didn't get a good photo of, but it had a white stripe along the sides, kind of like a chipmunk. So we have rock squirrels, antelope squirrels, desert cottontail, mule deer, and quite a few reptiles like this common checkered whiptail. So there's just a lot of variety of life out there in this desert and along this desert oases to look for during our time there. Exotic species, we mentioned the buffalo, the bison was, is one that's now kind of reintroduced back, which was a native species, but there's also things that are definitely not native, like camels. I mean, you're talking about a surreal experience to be driving along and all of a sudden seeing a camel out there with its doula exposed. It's just really impressive, some of the things that you'll see, just magnificent views of things. Some of the exotics that we might see in addition to the camel would be axis deer. They were quite wary, actually, impalas, llamas, and of course these camels are just in and around the ranch roads leading into the ranch. And one of our excursions will be definitely to go out and see the Indian pictographs. And there's even some Indian caves nearby that you can see some of this amazing paintings from about 8,000 years ago. So these are really old, beautiful, well-preserved Indian pictographs. So it's just a wonderful thing to see, in addition to all the other natural experiences during this luxury resort destination. And I just want you to know how happy I am that you tuned in today and listened to a little bit of the West Texas experience during migration. And we would love to see you out in West Texas this spring. Thank you all.
Hey, Brad, thanks for that great presentation.
I really appreciate your work on these webinars. They're so much fun to tune into.
And thanks everybody in the audience for joining us today. I'm glad you could be here. Before we go into the question and answer session, let's just go over the dates quickly, the details. South Texas in Style, it's a birds, nature, and culture tour with Brad McKinney and Rick Wright. That will operate January 13th through the 23rd, 2026. And it will have an upriver extension as well. These tours will be managed by Eric at ventbird.com. And also, let me highlight that you can now register online at our website, ventbird.com. So that's a real pleasure if you would like to just do it in the comfort of your own home on your computer. And then the second tour that Brad will be leading is the West Texas Spring Migration, Cibolo Creek Ranch in the Davis Mountains. And that is in April 24th through May 1st, 2026. And again, that's also Eric is the operations manager. So now let's get to questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat or the Q&A section in the toolbar. Brad, we have one here from Mark. He says, how does a guest without a car transition from the 50th to the West Texas tour? And so you'll be doing this. So tell us, how is that transition happening? You moved from Beaumont to El Paso on the same day. Is that what's happening?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. The details of how we get from the tour to the airport, there will be no problem with that transportation. And from the airport to El Paso, I think is a one-way flight. I'm not sure about the particulars yet, but just know that it's going to happen in the morning on the travel day, that first day. So I don't have anything specific to tell you, except that it's going to be very doable, because that afternoon we'll start our Cibolo Creek Davis Mountains tour in El Paso. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of time for me to load up the ice chest with some things. So I imagine we'll be able to make that transition around noontime in El Paso, somewhere in that time frame.
And if anybody has specific questions about flights, reach out to Eric Lindquist, the operations manager, and he can give you those flight details at your, whenever you send him an email, or give us a call at the office. Brad, can you tell us a little bit about the hiking again and the temperature ranges in West Texas? What should people expect as a high in April and the low temperatures? And are there hiking, because you were saying at the South Texas tour in winter that there will be a few hikes, maybe around 1 or 2 miles on level ground, and they have an opportunity to hang out at bird feeders if they don't want to do those hikes. What is that like for the Texas in West Texas?
Yes, good question, actually. The actual hikes are going to maybe even be shorter in the Trans-Pecos in the April tour to Cibolo Creek and Davis Mountains. A lot of the birding will be from the vans. The hikes, although they'll be short, they may have a little bit of an irregular terrain involved, just because of the rocky nature to the Cibolo Creek area. But at the Davis Mountains, a lot of that's going to be, those 2 days there, for example, will be pretty solid level terrain. There won't be much elevational hiking at all. It'll all be essentially from the vans. The state park, it'll be short hikes. At the nature preserve, a lot of the vans will be driving in, and then the hikes will be, less than a quarter mile usually from the vans. Now, once we get to Cibolo Creek, there will be a little bit. It's still a nice maintained trails along the creek. One of the first hikes will be just walking right up the stream up to the actual springs themselves near the Cibolo Creek Ranch, maybe a half mile. The temperature, though, temperature is going to probably be fairly mild in late April at Cibolo Creek. It'll probably be hottest right, of course, in the middle of the day, but the mornings and the evenings might be cool. And depending on passages of fronts, which is certainly possible late April, it could dip down into the 60s, low 60s, upper 50s. I wouldn't expect it to be any cooler than that, but you just never know during that time in late April. But I would expect, though, to be fairly warm temperatures during the day, cooler at night. Most likely.
And much drier climate, right, than South Texas.
Certainly.
We had a question here from Jill. She wanted to know what the single supplement is for the tours. Jill, for the South Texas in Style tour, it's $675, and for the Cibolo Creek, let me see if I can find that real quickly.
Sorry, that's my dog. He's such a, oh my God, Sam.
It is, I think I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I'm not quite pulling that up as quickly as I thought, Jill. Let me ask you a question, Brad, about these two tours and photography opportunities, and how are scopes being used, and should people bring their own scopes, and what are those features like?
Oh yeah, that's another real good question. Both leaders will have scopes, and we will, but usually on a tour that, it's a 12 max tour on both. There usually is one or two that bring scopes, but with 2 scopes, it moves pretty quickly. Everyone can usually get on birds quite easily. So there's really no need to bring your own scope, but certainly bring it if you'd like. Photography wise, we can do both digiscoping through I have a Allen attachment, which is a magnetic attachment that David Ascanio really got me going on a couple of years ago when I was co-leading with him in Costa Rica. So if you happen to have a $49 phone adapter made by OLLIN, then you can literally just pop your phone right up to my scope and digiscope short videos or stills. So that's going to be available. Once everyone's gotten good looks, of course, at the birds themselves, we'll have a digiscope opportunity. You don't need that adapter. You can just kind of hold it up to the eyepiece, but it's just really nice and quick if you happen to have that adapter. And again, it's through allin.com, OLLIN. But photographic opportunities with the digital cameras today, fantastic opportunities. So a lot of not only the bird feeding stations, but and water features, but from the hawk towers, from along the trail, there's usually lots of photo ops both on the South Texas in style as well as the West Texas migration tour. So there'll be plenty of opportunity. Bring your scope if you'd like. It's certainly something that you will use. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Here's a trick question for you, Brad. If people were debating on which one of these they should sign up for, which one should they sign up for? Wow. If they could only choose one, is there a preference? Do you have a favorite? Or is the answer they just have to sign up for both, maybe one this year and the other one next year? Well,
one's a longer tour. And, and of course, from the Valley, I've got to say, I love South Texas in style. I mean, that's my home for 40 years. I know this area very well. It's a lot of fun. You're going to see quite a variety of things from South Texas specialties to coastal birds and even rarities, possibly, and specialties. And again, if you include the upriver extension, we're talking about a 14-day tour, but it is a much more relaxed kind of deeper dive. So we're going to be spending a lot of time, not rushing around, but really fully exploring each of the locations we go to. West Texas, it's going to be awesome. I mean, it's a shorter tour. Really, it's a 2-destination tour, kind of like In Style is basically based out of two hotels, the same as the West Texas tour. But it's just, it's just a difference in, one's migration, one's in the desert, one's in the mountains. The other one's more in a delta flatland in winter. Winter's more variable. I mean, last year we had a little bit of cool weather that kind of came through, which is kind of uncharacteristic to have temperatures, in the low 50s. Normally it's like you mentioned, Ben, it's in the mid to upper 60s during the day, or in the afternoons and mornings, it's pretty mild. At night, it might chill down a little bit, but not much. So, gosh, it's just whatever your pleasure is. Both are going to be great.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Brad, for those 2 presentations today.
Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Really love Vent Travelers. Would love to see you on any of the 5 opportunities that there are for Texas tours. We didn't really mention the other Texas tours. There's going to be 5 total. We've just talked about 2 of them. The 50th anniversary celebration in April is going to be obviously wonderful. That has both pre and post tour excursions, as well as the Cibolo Creek, which could be like a little bit larger or longer excursion. Also, spring in South Texas in late March and early April is going to be available. I think Barry Zimmer does that one in late March and early April, and that's a nice tour, as well as Michael O'Brien and Louise Zamitis are going to be doing a November tour at Rockport in November. So there's a lot of opportunities to see great Texas birds in 2026. Super happy to be doing 3 of them. Thanks so much, Ben. I really appreciate you, executing this webinar as you do so well.
Thank you very much, Brad, and thanks everybody in the audience. We hope to hear from you soon and see you in the field. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you all.